cold mist hangs over Salisbury Plain. The horizon glows faintly as the first light of dawn creeps across the grass. Out of the fog, massive stones rise in silence, their ancient shadows stretching across the earth. Stonehenge. For thousands of years, it has stood here, motionless, unyielding, and yet whispering a question that has never been answered. How could people with no wheels, no pulleys, no metal tools, and no written language drag stones weighing as much as 40 tons across hills, rivers, and valleys? How could a so-called primitive society have carved, transported, and raised them with such uncanny precision? The official story says that Neolithic farmers built Stonehenge between 3000 and 2000 BC. They used bone tools, wooden sledges, and simple ropes. They spent centuries aligning the stones with the rising sun, the setting moon, and the turning seasons. That is the narrative written in textbooks, repeated in documentaries, and echoed by guides who lead tourists through the English countryside. But look closer, and the story begins to fracture. The smaller bluestones at Stonehenge came from the Preseli Hills of Wales, over 140 miles away. No evidence shows how they were transported. The lintels atop the Great Sarsen stones are joined with perfect mortise and tenon joints, as if crafted by carpenters, not by Stone Age farmers. And the astronomical alignments, solstices, equinoxes, eclipses, are so precise that even modern engineers have struggled to explain them. If the official explanation is true, then Stonehenge is an anomaly that should not exist. If the official explanation is false, then Stonehenge is something far more extraordinary. A monument built with knowledge we are not supposed to understand. Stonehenge has become more than archaeology. It is a battlefield between truth and illusion, between curiosity and control. For centuries, it has drawn seekers, scholars, and dreamers. Yet every new discovery only deepens the enigma. Who built it? Why was it built? And perhaps most unsettling of all, what is being hidden from us? Because if Stonehenge was not built by the people we have been told, then someone else was here long before history admits. Someone with skills, purpose, and secrets powerful enough to echo across the ages. But what if the greatest monument of ancient Britain wasn't built by its people at all? Make sure to subscribe and ring the bell, because every mystery has a hidden side, and we're here to uncover it together. The textbook explanation of Stonehenge begins in the late Neolithic era, around 3000 BC. According to archaeologists, farming communities in southern Britain decided to build a ceremonial monument unlike anything attempted before. At first, the site was nothing more than a circular ditch and bank, enclosing an open space on Salisbury Plain. Wooden posts were set into the ground, forming rings that may have marked a sacred boundary. Over the centuries, this modest structure grew into the stone circle that still stands today. The story continues that between 2500 and 2000 BC, the great stones we recognize as Stonehenge were erected. Archaeologists divide this process into stages. First came the smaller bluestones, hauled from the Preseli Hills of Wales, nearly 140 miles away. Later, enormous sarsen stones, weighing up to 25 tons each, were dragged from Marlborough Downs, about 20 miles to the north. These sarsens were carefully shaped and arranged into the iconic horseshoe and outer circle, their lintels joined with mortise and tenon joints, as if the builders were master carpenters working in timber, rather than stone. The mainstream narrative suggests that thousands of people labored for generations to complete this task, with only stone hammers, wooden sledges, and ropes twisted from plant fibers. They quarried the rocks, transported them across rivers and hills, and erected them upright into sockets dug into the chalk. The work, it is said, was driven not by kings or rulers, but by communal devotion, by the shared vision of a farming people determined to create a sacred center that bound their society together. Evidence from the site appears to support parts of this story. Archaeologists have uncovered the remains of cremated human burials around the circle, suggesting Stonehenge may have served as a vast ceremonial cemetery. Animal bones, pottery shards, and tools have been discovered in the surrounding ditches, perhaps remnants of ritual feasts. Some scholars believe the circle functioned as a gathering place, uniting scattered communities for ceremonies tied to life, death, and the cycles of the heavens. Solar and lunar alignments add weight to this interpretation. The most famous occurs on the summer solstice, when the rising sun aligns perfectly with the heel stone and the heart of the monument. At the winter solstice, the setting sun falls neatly between stones on the opposite horizon. These alignments suggest Stonehenge was designed not only as a sacred space, but also as a cosmic calendar, a monument that stitched human life to the rhythm of the heavens. For centuries, romantic theories flourished around the site. In the 17th and 18th centuries, antiquarians claimed Stonehenge was built by the Druids, the mysterious priestly class of the ancient Celts. This image, white-robed figures chanting in the stone circle, became so iconic that it lingers even today. But modern archaeology has shown that Druids lived nearly 2,000 years after Stonehenge was constructed. Whatever its original purpose, it cannot have been built by Druidic hands. Instead, the consensus among scholars is that Stonehenge was the work of late Stone Age farmers, gradually transforming their landscape through collective effort. The monument, they argue, was a centre for ritual, astronomy, burial, and perhaps even healing. The bluestones from Wales were once believed to have mystical properties, leading some to speculate that people travelled to Stonehenge seeking cures for illness. On paper, the official story appears coherent, a slow, communal construction project by determined Neolithic farmers, guided by a reverence for the skies and a need to mark the passage of time. Yet even as archaeologists present this picture, they acknowledge its glaring gaps. For while the narrative explains the when of Stonehenge, it struggles mightily with the how. Consider first the transportation of the bluestones. Modern experiments have attempted to replicate the journey, dragging stones on wooden sledges and rolling them on logs. In one such trial, volunteers managed to move a 2-ton block only a short distance before the logs splintered and ropes snapped. The bluestones, however, weighed up to 4 tons each, and they were not moved across a smooth road, but across hills, forests, and rivers. Some theorists suggest they were floated on rafts along waterways, yet no clear evidence supports this method, and the rivers along the route would have posed treacherous obstacles. Then there are the sarsen stones. Each one weighs as much as 25 tons, with some estimates closer to 40. Quarrying them from Marlborough Downs with stone tools would have been backbreaking, if not impossible. Transporting them 20 miles and then standing them upright into sockets requires a level of engineering that has baffled even modern experts. One proposed method involves building enormous wooden frames, digging ramps, and using hundreds of people with ropes to lever the stones upright. But such reconstructions remain speculative. No wooden tools, sledges, or ramps survive to prove how it was done. Equally puzzling is the precision of the construction. The lintels that form the circle's outer ring are not simply laid across the uprights. They are carved to fit with tongue and groove joints, locked in place like puzzle pieces. The tops of the uprights were carefully leveled, despite uneven ground, so that the lintels form a smooth, continuous ring. This level of craftsmanship seems to require advanced surveying techniques, knowledge of geometry, and tools capable of shaping massive stones with remarkable accuracy. And then there are the alignments with the heavens. The solstices are only the beginning. Some researchers argue that Stonehenge encodes eclipses, lunar cycles, and perhaps even more complex astronomical patterns. For Neolithic farmers with no written language and no known mathematical system, this is extraordinary. How could they have tracked celestial movements so precisely without instruments? Did they inherit knowledge from an earlier tradition, or from a source we have not yet uncovered? The contradictions pile up. If Stonehenge was a cemetery, why was so much effort devoted to perfecting its astronomical alignments? If it was only a ritual center, why design joints and structures of such engineering sophistication? If it was built entirely with stone tools and ropes, why does the monument still inspire doubt among modern engineers trying to replicate the feat? Even within mainstream archaeology, there is quiet admission that the official story is incomplete. Scholars often speak of Stonehenge as mysterious, acknowledging that many aspects remain unsolved. While excavation has provided valuable dates and evidence, it has not explained the driving force behind the monument's construction, nor the techniques that made it possible. At conferences and in journals, one finds repeated phrases: still uncertain, poorly understood, remains debated. The gaps in the narrative invite suspicion. For if the builders of Stonehenge were truly Neolithic farmers with primitive tools, then they accomplished a task that seems nearly impossible. If, on the other hand, the builders possessed knowledge or techniques that have since been lost, then Stonehenge hints at a forgotten chapter of human history. The official story, then, is not a solution but a veil. It covers the stones with a plausible tale, while leaving the most essential questions unanswered. Who truly built Stonehenge? How did they move the stones? Why did they align them with such celestial precision? And what deeper purpose might have guided their labor? For now, the textbooks insist that Stonehenge was built by the people of Neolithic Britain. Yet beneath the surface, doubts linger like shadows at dawn. But when you strip away the textbook version, cracks begin to show. Cracks big enough to let in a much older and stranger possibility. When the neat edges of the official story begin to crumble, a deeper question rises. Did ancient people possess technologies that have since vanished from human memory? If Stonehenge defies the limits of bone tools and wooden sledges, perhaps the answer lies not in who built it, but in what knowledge they held. Across the world, we find echoes of this same enigma. The Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt, built with stones weighing up to 80 tons, still resists definitive explanation. Machu Picchu in Peru, with its perfectly interlocking stones, seems to mock the idea that only iron chisels could shape granite. At Pumapunku in Bolivia, blocks weighing hundreds of tons are cut with angles so precise that even diamond-tipped tools today struggle to replicate them. The mystery is not isolated to Britain. It is part of a global pattern. Ancient sites where primitive explanations fail to account for engineering brilliance. If Egypt and South America hint at forgotten knowledge, then Stonehenge may well be Britain's entry into the same hidden chapter of human achievement. Its size alone is less imposing than the pyramids, but its sophistication lies in subtlety. The precision of its alignments, the complexity of its joints, and the audacity of transporting stones across impossible distances. These details suggest something beyond brute force, something more advanced than the trial and error attributed to Neolithic farmers. One theory gaining attention is that Stonehenge was not merely a monument to mark the heavens, but a machine that interacted with them. Researchers in acoustics have long noted that stone circles amplify and distort sound. Experiments have shown that clapping or drumming inside such circles produces resonances, echoes, and vibrations that can be felt in the body. Some suggest that Stonehenge was designed as a kind of sound chamber, where chants, music, or ritual drumming could create altered states of consciousness. The stones, positioned in rings and horseshoes, may have been carefully placed to harness these effects, turning the circle into a literal instrument of power. Could it be that the builders possessed an understanding of sound that we have lost? Ancient cultures often linked sound with creation itself. Consider the Om of Hindu tradition, the spoken word of Genesis, or the myth of Orpheus taming the world with music. If Stonehenge functioned as a resonant device, its builders were tapping into a universal principle, vibration, as the key to unlocking both physical and spiritual transformation. Beyond acoustics, the astronomical precision of Stonehenge adds to the impression of forgotten expertise. The alignment with the summer and winter solstices is obvious, but scholars have pointed out that the site also tracks the 18.6-year lunar cycle, a rhythm far more complex than the yearly rising and setting of the sun. Some have suggested that Stonehenge could even predict eclipses, making it not just a ritual site, but a scientific observatory. If true, this would place its builders among the world's earliest astronomers, wielding knowledge we did not expect to find in prehistoric Europe. Where, then, did such knowledge come from? Mainstream archaeology insists it was learned gradually through centuries of observation. Yet to encode such precision in stone requires more than casual stargazing. It demands a system of measurement, long-term records, and the ability to translate patterns of the sky into architecture on the ground. If Neolithic farmers achieved this, then they were far more advanced than history admits. If they did not, then perhaps they inherited the knowledge from somewhere or someone else. Transporting the stones themselves raises even more troubling questions. Experiments with wooden rollers have largely failed. Logs break, ropes snap, and friction makes the process excruciating. To move the blue stones from Wales, theorists suggest they were dragged overland or floated on rafts along rivers. But even if the rivers could bear the load, the logistics of navigating rapids, bends, and marshes with multi-ton stones strain credibility. Alternative theories abound, many dismissed as fantasy by academia. Some legends speak of levitation, stones moved by sound, vibration, or energy fields unknown to modern science. Though this idea seems implausible, it is curious how many ancient myths describe singing stones, or gods who lifted great weights with ease. Skeptics scoff, Yet in the mid-20th century, a Swedish engineer named Henry Kjellson documented stories from Tibet of monks using drums, horns, and chants to levitate stones up cliffs. Whether folklore or fact, such accounts persist in multiple cultures, whispering of a principle science has not yet rediscovered. Even within modern times, anomalies surface. In the 1930s, a Latvian man named Edward Leedskalnin single-handedly built the Coral Castle in Florida, moving blocks of limestone weighing several tons. He left no clear explanation of his methods, claiming only that he had discovered the secret of the ancients. His work remains an enigma, a 20th century Stonehenge in miniature, suggesting that forgotten principles of balance, magnetism, or sound might unlock feats that appear impossible. But why? If such knowledge existed, has it vanished? Some researchers argue that it was deliberately suppressed, either lost in catastrophes or guarded by elites. Others suggest that early experiments revealing unusual properties of resonance, magnetism, or energy fields have been sidelined by mainstream science for fear of ridicule. Indeed, history is full of mavericks whose radical ideas were dismissed, only to be vindicated decades later. Could Stonehenge represent one such case? A giant experiment whose principles remain hidden because they do not fit our assumptions about prehistory? The possibility of erased knowledge grows more compelling when we recall how civilizations fall. The burning of the Library of Alexandria erased untold volumes of wisdom. Entire cultures have been wiped out by floods, invasions, or disease. Could Stonehenge be the surviving fragment of a technology too easily dismissed as myth? What if its builders knew how to harness sound, energy, or astronomy in ways we can barely grasp today? Mainstream explanations struggle against this tide of speculation. They insist the stones were dragged on sledges, raised with ropes, and aligned through trial and error. Yet every attempt to replicate these feats exposes their fragility. Experiments often require modern tools, cranes, or hundreds of volunteers to succeed. And even then, they fall short of the precision achieved by the builders. If Neolithic farmers really did this with nothing more than stone hammers and determination, then they were geniuses of engineering, whose techniques we should urgently study, not dismiss as primitive improvisation. There is a striking irony here. In our age of satellites and digital technology, we still struggle to explain how a society without metal tools could construct monuments that endure millennia. Could it be that progress is not a straight line but a cycle? That humanity once held knowledge it later lost, leaving behind only these mute stone witnesses as clues. Stonehenge, viewed through this lens, is less a mystery of archaeology and more a riddle of memory. The stones stand as relics of a science or art forgotten, whispering that human history may be far older and far stranger than the textbooks allow. But if it wasn't forgotten technology, then perhaps it wasn't our ancestors who built it at all. The cracks in the official story grow wider when we consider the possibility that Stonehenge may not belong to the timeline we have been given at all. What if the monument is far older than archaeologists admit? What if the Neolithic farmers who supposedly raised its stones were not the original builders, but inheritors, caretakers of a site whose origins stretch back into a forgotten epoch? Across the globe, evidence has emerged that advanced societies may have existed long before the dawn of recorded history. One of the most striking examples is Göbekli Tepe in modern-day Turkey. Discovered in the 1990s, it shattered the assumptions of archaeology. Carved pillars, decorated with intricate animal reliefs, were dated to around 9600 BC, thousands of years earlier than the first cities, temples, or even agriculture. In one stroke, Göbekli Tepe proved that human culture in the aftermath of the Ice Age was far more complex than we had believed. If such sophistication could exist 12,000 years ago, who is to say that other sites, like Stonehenge, might not also have roots in a deeper past? Mainstream dating of Stonehenge relies on radiocarbon evidence from organic remains found at the site, burnt bones, wooden posts, and tools. But these materials may only date the last phases of activity, not the original construction. If Stonehenge was first assembled by a much earlier civilization and later reused by Neolithic farmers, the evidence of that earlier phase could have been lost to time. What we see today might be only the final chapter of a much older story. Myth and folklore provide intriguing hints. In the legends of Britain, Stonehenge was said to have been built by giants who brought the stones from Ireland. The tale, preserved by Geoffrey of Monmouth in the 12th century, tells how the wizard Merlin used his magic to transport the mighty stones and arrange them on Salisbury Plain. While modern historians dismiss this as medieval fantasy, the story may preserve an echo of something older, a memory of builders so extraordinary that later generations could only explain their feats. Through giants and magic, the idea of giants, building Stonehenge is not unique. Across the British Isles, folklore speaks of giant beings shaping the land, piling stones or carving hills. Similar myths appear worldwide, from the Nephilim of biblical tradition to the Titans of Greek mythology. Could these legends be distorted memories of a vanished race? Beings larger, stronger, or more skilled than ordinary humans? Or do they represent survivors of a catastrophe, remembered through myth as figures beyond the scale of normal life? The legend of Merlin adds another layer. Merlin, half man and half otherworldly, was said to possess knowledge that transcended human ability. In one tale, he transported Stonehenge from a distant land not by muscle, but by harnessing hidden forces of nature. Could this story be a symbolic retelling of forgotten technology? Levitation, resonance, or energy manipulation, cloaked in the language of myth? Beyond myth, the possibility of an earlier builder connects to one of humanity's oldest and most consistent stories: the flood. Nearly every ancient culture tells of a great deluge that swept away a world before ours. In Mesopotamia, the Epic of Gilgamesh recounts a flood that destroyed civilization. In the Bible, Noah survives a divine catastrophe. In Hindu tradition, Manu escapes rising waters to repopulate the earth. Even Native American, African, and Pacific Islander myths echo the same theme. If such a flood occurred at the end of the Ice Age, around 12,000 years ago, it would have submerged coastlines and obliterated settlements. Survivors might have fled inland, carrying fragments of their knowledge. They could have built monuments as markers, calendars, or warnings for future generations. In this view, Stonehenge becomes more than a temple. It becomes a message from a world washed away, standing against time as a memorial of both loss and survival. Support for this idea comes not only from myths, but from geology. At the end of the last ice age, rising seas swallowed vast tracts of land. Britain itself was once connected to continental Europe by a region known as Doggerland, now lying beneath the North Sea. This fertile plain, home to countless communities, vanished around 6000 BC under encroaching waters. If advanced societies thrived there, their ruins now lie hidden beneath the waves, and Stonehenge could represent one of the few surviving monuments built by their descendants. The very layout of Stonehenge suggests continuity with older traditions. Circles of stone appear across Europe, from Brittany to the Orkney Islands. Some date to the same period as Stonehenge, others earlier. They form a network of megalithic culture stretching back into prehistory. The uniformity of design hints at shared knowledge passed across generations, or even across catastrophes. Stonehenge, then, may not be an isolated anomaly, but the crown jewel of a forgotten civilization's sacred architecture. To accept this possibility, however, means admitting that history as we know it is incomplete. Archaeology, built upon layers of soil and artifacts, only scratches the surface. The deep past, stretching beyond 10,000 years, is shrouded in uncertainty. Evidence is scarce, often destroyed by erosion, floods, or human activity. Yet myths, legends, and unexplained monuments remain as stubborn clues, whispers from an earlier chapter that refuses to be silenced. What makes the idea even more compelling is how global these clues are. From Easter Island's Moai statues to the Nazca lines of Peru, from the step pyramids of Mesopotamia to the sphinxes of Egypt, ancient monuments often defy their supposed creators' known capabilities. Stonehenge fits seamlessly into this puzzle. If advanced societies once walked the earth long before our accepted timeline, their fingerprints are scattered across continents. Skeptics argue that myths are not history, that folklore cannot substitute for hard evidence. They point to radiocarbon dating, to excavation layers, to the absence of advanced tools in Neolithic Britain. Yet such arguments assume that what we have found is all there is to find. Archaeology is not finished, it is only a glimpse pieced together from fragments. To declare certainty from such fragments may be the real fantasy. Consider again Göbekli Tepe. Before its discovery, archaeologists would have laughed at the idea of a 12,000-year-old stone temple. Yet there it stands, undeniable, rewriting what we thought we knew. If one such site can overturn centuries of certainty, what might others still buried beneath earth or sea reveal? Could Stonehenge one day be redated, its origins traced to a world before time? The question lingers. Was Stonehenge truly the work of farmers around 3000 BC? or the remnant of a civilization erased by flood, remembered only in myth as giants, magicians, or gods? Was its purpose ritual, or was it survival, an attempt to anchor cosmic knowledge in stone, immune to catastrophe? The stones themselves remain mute, offering no easy answers. But silence does not mean absence. The possibility of a civilization before time haunts every alignment, every joint, every impossible journey of those blue stones from Wales. It lingers in the folklore of Britain, in the whispers of giants, in the hand of Merlin, and in the universal memory of the flood. And if the builders belonged to a world before ours, then what happened to them? Did they vanish entirely, or did their knowledge survive in fragments, carried into the future by those who followed? Could it be that Neolithic farmers did not build Stonehenge from scratch, but inherited it, modified it, and left their own layer upon an already ancient monument? The possibility cannot be dismissed, for if Stonehenge is older than we imagine, then our history is younger than it should be. The past, as we know it, is merely the surface of something deeper, something stranger. But what if the true identity of Stonehenge's builders was deliberately erased from our history? For centuries, Stonehenge has stood as a silent question mark, yet behind the quiet stones lies a storm of controversy rarely admitted in public. The official narrative, Neolithic farmers, centuries of labor, solar alignments, is repeated so often that it has become more dogma than science. But whenever evidence surfaces that threatens this fragile consensus, something curious happens. It is not explored but ignored, not celebrated but sidelined, not investigated but buried. Consider how archaeology itself is funded. Excavations require permits, grants, and institutional backing. Scholars who step too far outside the accepted timeline risk not just their reputations but their livelihoods. Careers can collapse if a single claim is branded pseudo-archaeology. The fear of ridicule is itself a form of control, and so the mystery of Stonehenge becomes less about evidence and more about authority. Who has the power to define truth, and who does not? There are stories whispered among researchers about finds that never make the journals. In the early 20th century, reports circulated of tools unearthed near Salisbury that did not fit the Neolithic toolkit. Some resembled finely worked metal fragments, though they were quickly dismissed as modern contamination. In the 1960s, a researcher claimed to find evidence that the blue stones had been set into earlier sockets long before the accepted dates. The claim was ridiculed, the paper unpublished, the researcher's career quietly ended. Such incidents are not confined to Britain. Around the world, discoveries that hint at civilizations older than our timeline vanish from discussion. In South America, skeletons of unusual height are often reclassified or lost in storage. In Egypt, tool marks on granite blocks that suggest advanced cutting technology are waved away as misunderstood chisel work. Why is the pattern always the same? Evidence that fits is preserved. Evidence that does not is forgotten. Some say it is simply academic conservatism. After all, science moves slowly, requiring rigorous proof. But others suspect something deeper. Governments and institutions benefit from a stable version of history. The official timeline underpins education, national identity, even geopolitics. To admit that a site like Stonehenge might predate recorded history by thousands of years, or that it may have been built with knowledge we no longer possess, would shatter more than textbooks. It would rewrite humanity's story from the ground up. Is it coincidence, then, that aerial surveys in the 20th century revealed dozens of hidden earthworks around Stonehenge, only for many of them to vanish under agricultural development before they could be studied? Is it mere accident that artifacts from early digs are missing from museum archives, mislabeled or locked away in private collections? Skeptics may dismiss these as clerical errors, but the pattern suggests something more deliberate. Even within mainstream institutions, cracks are visible. Archaeologists often admit quietly, between lines of certainty, that the dating of Stonehenge is still riddled with gaps. Charcoal samples taken from post holes may not date the stones themselves. Bones found nearby may represent later burials, not the original builders. In other words, the neat narrative of Stonehenge being erected between 3000 and 2000 BC is built on circumstantial layers, not bedrock certainty. Yet this admission rarely reaches the public. The question must be asked, why maintain the illusion? One answer may lie in control. If humanity were to accept that advanced civilizations existed long before the official timeline, it would upend our sense of progress. We would no longer be the pinnacle of history, but the inheritors of forgotten ages. Technology, spirituality, even cosmology would have to be reconsidered. Perhaps this is why myths of giants, gods, and lost continents are relegated to folklore rather than studied with open seriousness. They point to truths too destabilizing to acknowledge. Take, for instance, the legends of Merlin magically constructing Stonehenge. Academics laugh at the story, but the persistence of the tale hints at an older memory, reframed as myth when it no longer fit. Folklore often preserves what history discards. If Merlin was not a wizard, could he represent a figure from a forgotten culture, someone with knowledge so advanced it appeared as magic to later generations? If so, then dismissing the legend is not harmless. It is a way of erasing the trail back to truth. There are also political layers. During World War II, military installations were built close to Stonehenge, and parts of the surrounding landscape were sealed off for decades. Records of what was unearthed during that time remain fragmentary. Was it simply strategic use of open land? Or did the ancient site hold secrets too valuable or too dangerous to leave unguarded? Conspiracy theories abound, suggesting that Stonehenge was studied for its acoustic or energetic properties, perhaps even its connection to navigation systems older than our maps. None of these claims can be fully verified, but the lack of transparency only deepens suspicion. And then there is the question of why governments worldwide seem to echo the same script when it comes to unexplained archaeology. Deny, ridicule, suppress. In the United States, artifacts that suggest pre-Columbian contact are quietly archived. In Asia, stone structures older than accepted dynasties are labeled natural formations. In Europe, anything that predates the Mesolithic is dismissed outright. Why this relentless policing of the timeline? Could it be that all these monuments, from Britain to Turkey to Peru, are fragments of a shared prehistory, one whose revelation would rewrite the human story entirely? Stonehenge sits at the center of this larger web. It is not just a circle of stones, it is a symbol of what we are allowed to know and what we are not. If the truth is that Stonehenge was built by a civilization before the flood, or by survivors of a cataclysm, or by beings with knowledge we cannot yet replicate, then our entire foundation of history trembles. That is why the cracks in the official narrative are patched so quickly, why anomalies vanish into archives, why questions are deflected. It is not about preserving facts, it is about preserving control. But the stones remain. Their presence is a defiance of silence. Every unanswered question, every missing artifact, every buried report is itself a clue, pointing not to absence, but to a truth too dangerous for the mainstream to acknowledge. A truth that perhaps explains why the builders of Stonehenge are absent from history, because someone, somewhere, wanted them erased. And if the truth has been buried, what was so dangerous about it that it had to remain hidden? Stonehenge has endured for thousands of years, yet in many ways it remains untouched by time. The stones stand not only as physical monuments, but as questions carved into the earth itself. We have explored the official narrative of Neolithic farmers laboring with ropes and sledges, the possibility of forgotten technologies that have slipped from our grasp, the haunting suggestion of civilizations lost before recorded history, and the troubling hints of suppression and cover-ups that continue into the modern age. What emerges is not a single answer but a tangled riddle, one that defies every attempt to lock it neatly inside the textbooks. The contradictions are impossible to ignore. How could people without wheels or pulleys transport stones weighing 40 tons across valleys, rivers, and hills? How did they carve joints so precise that the lintels sit balanced even today? How could a primitive society have encoded astronomical alignments with the solstices, equinoxes, and eclipses, achieving a level of precision that rivals modern engineering? The more closely one looks, the more the official story begins to wobble. And then there are the myths, strange legends that seem to echo truths just beyond reach. Giants hauling the stones across the land, a wizard named Merlin raising them by enchantment, survivors of a great flood leaving markers for a world rebuilt after catastrophe. Folklore is often dismissed as fantasy, yet its persistence across cultures hints at memories of something real, reframed as myth when history could not contain it. Could Stonehenge be one of those fragments, a monument from a time before time? Overlaying all of this is the shadow of suppression. Reports of anomalous finds dismissed without study, excavations cut short, artifacts misplaced, evidence locked away, scholars silenced, reputations destroyed. funding withdrawn for those who dared to step outside the narrow corridor of official history. If this is truly just about stones on a plain, why does the narrative need such fierce protection? Why does the past feel guarded, not uncovered? Perhaps the real power of Stonehenge is not in what it tells us, but in what it withholds. It refuses to give up its truth easily. It challenges us to question authority, to distrust easy answers, to recognize that history is written not only by the victors, but by those who control the story. In that sense, Stonehenge is less a monument than a mirror. It reflects our need for certainty, our fear of the unknown, and our uneasy relationship with the possibility that humanity has forgotten more than it remembers. For some, this is unsettling. For others, it is liberating. Because if Stonehenge cannot be explained by the official version, then perhaps our past is richer, stranger, and far more extraordinary than we have been led to believe. Perhaps civilizations did rise and fall long before our accepted timeline. Perhaps knowledge once existed that we can scarcely imagine today. And perhaps those echoes are preserved not only in legends but in stone, waiting for us to relearn what we once knew. The mystery of Stonehenge will not be solved in one film, one book, or one lifetime. But maybe that is the point. Its endurance across millennia reminds us that some questions are meant to stay open, to fuel curiosity across generations. Every time the sun rises between those stones, it reenacts a ritual older than memory. Every shadow cast across the grass is a reminder that we are standing inside a story much larger than ourselves. So what then is Stonehenge? A temple to the sun? A giant calendar? A burial ground? A sound machine? A relic of lost technology? A monument from a forgotten world? The answer, perhaps, is all of these, or none. Stonehenge is not just a structure, it is a symbol, one that refuses to let us rest easy in the illusion that history is complete. It whispers across time, look again, ask again, do not be satisfied with what you are told. And so, the truth is still standing in the fields of Salisbury, waiting for us to listen, waiting for us to strip away the layers of silence, suppression, and assumption, waiting for us to see not only what is there, but what has been hidden. The question remains, who really built Stonehenge, and why are we still being kept from the answer?